We'll call the meeting of the Minot City Council to order for today, Monday, April 19th. It is 5:30 in the afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I would just ask that you go ahead and put your electronic devices on silent or vibrate so we can keep the distractions down to a minimum. Roll call, please.
Evans? Janser?
Here.
Olson? Here. Pittner?
Here.
Quadrigula?
Here.
Ross?
Here.
Sitma?
Here. Number two is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Number three on our agenda this afternoon is COVID update. We do have Ms. Lisa Clute from 1st District Health Unit for an update on where the vaccinations are and other information. Good afternoon, Lisa.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the council. Just a brief update. The vaccinations, and again, I always have to state that these do not include all of the vaccinations provided by Minot Air Force Base and veterans, so we know these numbers are higher. But in the 75 and older population, and this is for Ward County, we have 3,003 people vaccinated, so a 72.5% vaccination rate. The 65 to 75-year-olds, we have 3,418 vaccinated with a 61.7% vaccination rate. We have in the 18 through 64-year-olds, and that doesn't include the 16-year-olds that we have vaccinated. We have vaccinated 10,953, so a 25.7% vaccination rate in that group. The state of North Dakota is just under 50% of vaccines, so in that 45% vaccination rate. And we are hanging close in there, but again, I'm not confident about the numbers that I'm giving you, and so I'm giving you the numbers and then saying what I think is that we are underreported on that. So in the news this last weekend, we are following the J&J COVID vaccine pause that is on. I had a meeting this morning, the ACIP, which is the immunization, the large immunization group that sets policy for vaccinations in the United States. They are meeting on Friday and will be likely have some announcements on Saturday and Sunday. So what we do know is that 6.8 million doses have been given of the J&J. The J&J was quite popular at 1st District. We were getting quite a few people interested in that one dose vaccine, particularly with the younger population, college age, and so forth. We do know that 6 individuals experienced blood clots from after the receipt of the J&J, which is not. That is actually a lower number of blood clots than the normal population would receive per that many doses. But they are using a lot of caution, pausing it, looking at it, and that's good. And we will follow their recommendations and directions when that comes out. So until then, we have Pfizer and Moderna available. Again, look to your providers, pharmacies, 1st District. Most of this week, we are doing second doses. We have a lot of second doses going on this week. However, we do have appointments available for first doses too. So if you wanted doses this week, then next week we will have a lot of appointments available for for that. So right now, the general gist is we probably have more vaccine than what we have interest in the vaccine. So that is where it's at right now. Seems like most people that have wanted the vaccine and have taken a lot of initiative to get it have accessed it. Now we'll begin looking at making things more readily available to people. I think it's important to continue the appointments as we've had them, because that's been very popular with those that have received it that way. But we may do some larger clinics also throughout the communities. So just a little bit about the variants. Right now, we have these variants in the state. It is the UK variant, South Africa variant, the Brazil variant, and then the US variant, or the ones out of the California area. We know that they typically are spreading more easily. Some of those variants can cause more severe symptoms than what we saw with the original. However, we do know that the vaccine has been effective on these variants. So stay tuned, continue to work to get people vaccinated. It's just a good idea to do. We do know that Pfizer is 100% effective on the South African variant, and that was done in a trial of 800. There was a smaller Israeli study, and that found a few breakthrough cases with the vaccine, but all of the vaccine limited symptoms. So we're continuing to gather more information on the effectiveness of the vaccine. It looks good. They're being over cautious, and that is extremely good with the pause that we're experiencing right now. And so we are just continuing to vaccinate and test. And so we are testing, and also with MSU, and we'll be carrying that through till the end of their school year, and with Dakota College, so, and the static site. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Clute. Any questions at this time? If not, Ms. Clute and I did speak before the meeting, and at this point, given the progression of vaccination, and I don't want to say the hitting some of the stride here with where we're at, not having every council update for COVID seems a reasonable request at this point, with Ms. Clute's time tied up doing lots of other things, but she did indicate that she would be more than happy and willing to speak individually if anybody had questions, or to come back for an update per request. So if no one has a problem with that, we will relieve Ms. Clute of her every council update and put her time back into district work then. Thank you, Lisa.
All right, thank you.
Number 4 on our agenda is the city manager's report. Mr. City Manager.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Before I start tonight, I did want to let you know that a little bit of an announcement here. So Friday, I met with our airport director, Mr. Rick Feltner, who has decided it's time to move on to some more fun and greener pastures and return home to Indiana. So he did tender his resignation and retirement. We will miss him, but I wanted to state publicly how much we appreciate the job he has done for the city of Minot and the airport. He came in at a difficult time 5 years ago with construction process with a new airport and everything else, and dealing with some of the challenges. You know, anytime you try to build a new building, not everything goes according to plan, and sometimes we have some things we got to fix here and there, and he's done that admirably, and has definitely provided leadership that gives us an airport that we can be proud of as a community collectively. And so I just wanted to express publicly our gratitude to him. He will be continuing to serve us through the early part of June. And we will begin the process of trying to find a recruiting firm to help find a replacement for him, but he will be difficult shoes to fill going forward. With that, I do have my council report. The memo is in the packet. I did highlight some significant projects that I've been working on, and will be some items that we'll be talking about here over the coming months and years. And so if the public is interested in some of the things that I'm working on and beginning to work towards, that's a good synopsis of a lot of the things that I'm working on. I will say I think the honeymoon period is over, and I'm starting to roll up my sleeves and get under the hood a little bit, and I'm looking forward to that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the council has with regards to my report.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Any questions at this time for our city manager? Okay. Thank you, sir. Number 5 on our agenda is consider the report of the Planning Commission. 5.1 is conditional use permit, climate-controlled storage. The Planning Commission recommends City Council approve a resolution for a conditional use permit to comply with Resolution Number 3621, a conditional use permit issued on June 3rd, 2019, for climate-controlled storage that specifies in Condition 1C that a new or amended conditional use permit must be obtained where a change in ownership occurs. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson for approval. Is there a second? Second by Alderman Pittner. Any discussion on the second from Alderman Ross, sorry. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Last call. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Number 6 is consent items. We have 15 different items on our agenda under consent. I have not had any pre-request to pull any one individual items. I would look out to the audience or onto the dais here if any one of these items needs to be pulled for individual consideration. Otherwise, they will be passed with recommendations by staff. Alderman Ross.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve.
Motion to approve as recommended. Is
Second.
there a second? Second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Our next section is the action items section. 7.1 is a driveway permit appeal, Green Acres 4th Edition, Lot 1. Mr. Kenneth Melgard is requesting a driveway permit to access the back half of Lot 1, Green Acres 4th Edition. The driveway would be used for access to a planned accessory structure that Mr. Melgard wishes to construct. On March 29th, 2021, Mr. Melgard applied for a right-of-way permit on 31st Avenue Southwest. The permit was denied by the city engineer. Mr. Melgard has appealed the decision to the city engineer for council consideration. The recommendation to council is to deny the appeal for a driveway permit at Green Acres 4th Edition, Lot 1. Is anyone here, Mr. Melgard or anyone else, if you do want to come forward? Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Oh, well, thank you for taking a few moments to visit with me here about this here. As you stated already, the request for it was denied by the city engineer. Back in 2015, roughly, I purchased an undeveloped lot that was behind my property. At the time, I saw there was a, I don't know how they phrase it in there, no access would be provided off 31st, and I didn't question it at the time, probably a little short-sighted on my part, as I didn't think at the time I was going to want to build anything back there, but as you can tell by the, I don't know if this was included in your guys' diagram here, the lot is of a very unusual, it's not square, I guess, and getting access to that portion of my land is almost impossible for me to do anything with it. So I guess what I am looking for is the variance to put a small driveway there so that I can access that portion of my property. Without it, I really have no way of getting back there. The south side where my house is at was only about 4 or 5 feet from the property line. And on the north side of my house, there's an easement running through there that I can't pave over or do anything with to get access that way. So the only way for me to get anything back there to make use of a structure I'd like to put back there is to be able to get off of 31st Avenue, or the future 31st Avenue that would be there. As of, and I understand where the city is going with it, that they don't want to give access there, but, you know, and the other owners on that street wouldn't have the same problem. I only have this problem because of the unusual, you know, the way that the lot is, how it's designed there, so.
Thank you, Mr. Melgard. Is there any questions at this time? Alderman Patagula.
Just want to make sure I'm clear here. You're asking for an access for a driveway to a garage, or is just a driveway of any kind, or access of any
Well,
kind?
I want to build a building back there, but I haven't really got too far into looking into the purchase of the building yet until I could figure out if I could have access to be able to get to the building back there, to build one back there, yes.
So is it a garage or isn't it?
It'll be roughly 36 by 40 feet, a small building, just that I could put on the back of the lot there to use it for storing like an RV or something like that.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions? Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Melgard. In the packet was also description then of the reasoning for the recommendations for denial. Are there any other comments or questions at this time before a motion is made? If not, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderwoman Olson.
I move that we uphold the denial for the request.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson for, to uphold the recommendation for the denial. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Alderman Patagula. Discussion. Alderman Patagula.
Yeah, I've looked at this property very closely. I regret not going out, actually, but I'm torn. I mean, normally I would go along with the recommendation of the city engineer, because I think we do need to keep access limited to streets, especially if they're going to grow. In this particular case, it is a very, very awkwardly shaped piece of property, and I don't see any constructive use for it if you can't get access to it. He's promised in his letter to the council that access would be limited to him and housemates. I think it's one of those rare situations where I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I'm not even sure that he'll be able to construct that larger building on that property. I don't know what the requirements are there, but it is really unusual. I guess I wish the Planning Commission hadn't approved it, because it certainly seems like an exceptional kind of piece of property. It's not a huge deal, but I think, you know, this is probably the only exception on that road, and doesn't sound like it's going to generate a whole lot of traffic. And I would imagine if we do approve it, that he would have to negotiate and make sure the specific location is, you know, reasonably convenient as far as the city is concerned, and we would have the control over that. And like I say, I normally don't like to counteract what city staff and the planning people recommend, but I think this is an exceptional case.
Alderman Ross.
Lance, can I have you step up?
Good afternoon, Mr. Meyer.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Just a quick question. I know since I've been elected, there's been a situation where I've been made aware of a request like this before that has been denied. Now, is this a case of if that road was developed, if 31st Avenue was extended, that eventually he could get a permit for a driveway there? But it has to be, it actually has to be a city street.
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Ross, currently the right-of-way for 31st Avenue adjacent to Mr. Melgard's property exists. So regardless if there's the street there today or not, if he would request a driveway permit, now would be the time to act on that. So, we made this recommendation, 5 years ago at the Planning Commission meeting, because we're we're trying to protect this corridor at that time just to prevent it from being overcome with access points, which is kind of already starting to happen on the east end. This one driveway alone isn't going to create significant issues, but what staff's concerned with is over time, if we allow additional driveways to come up on this roadway, then we start getting into the problems that we talked about last week on Broadway. Obviously, the traffic isn't as high, but we would envision when these three-quarter sections of Minot develop, there'll probably be 6,000-7,000 cars a day that drive on 31st Avenue. So we just want to plan ahead and protect it as much as we can. This may be a special case that you may want to consider, but in general, staff is going to follow those procedures, those policies that we have in place to try to protect these corridors from too many access points.
Thank you.
Any further questions for our city engineer at this time? Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Further discussion, Alderwoman Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Alderman Padragula to a sense that I think that this could be an exception that I would be willing to consider had it not been for the action that had already been taken by the Planning Commission in 2015. So I feel like a decision had already been made for us. I'm unaware if Mr. Melgard was aware of that decision or not, but I feel that they had already kind of set the course for us, and that's why I'm voting for the denial.
Further discussion. Just respectfully to Mr. Melgard, as I'm going to follow the recommendations for the denial as well, I certainly sympathize. The issue as I look is, we've run into many times, is sometimes within the past not following the plan of growth. And we've seen that on many different corridors in Minot. And that is wholly nothing against Mr. Melgard, just absolutely listening to the engineers and looking at our growth plan. Unfortunately, sometimes there's just tough decisions, and this is one of them. Further discussion. Last call. Motion is to approve the recommendation of denial for the appeal. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
No.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Number 7.2 on our agenda is authorize the eviction proceedings for an individual legally in a city-owned house while conducting a standard pre-demolition house inspection for a property acquired through eminent domain for a flood control project. Staff found that the owner of the house, who had repeatedly evaded being served notices regarding the acquisition, is in fact in the house and refusing to vacate. Despite her efforts to avoid the entire acquisition process, Ms. Lutzen remains eligible pursuant to the Federal Uniform Relocation Act to receive relocation benefits paid through the CDBG NDR State Water Commission match funds to help moving. Recommendations to the council is to authorize the outside counsel to commence legal actions to cause someone illegally staying in a city-acquired flood buyout property to leave the property.
Okay. I'm Debbie Lutzen. It's my house.
Ms. Lutzen, I do want to set a little bit of ground rules here
okay.
before we start. Before a motion is made, absolutely, we'll give you up to 5 minutes
Okay.
for your statements, and then we'll proceed from there. Please proceed.
Okay, it's my house you're referring to. I haven't evaded anything. I haven't talked to CDM Smith because I think they're a bunch of crooks. Everybody I've talked to, their houses have been under. The copy of comparable properties that they sent was at least 4 years old. All of the houses had been sold like 2 years before I even got the list, except for one wasn't even there anymore. It's over where the tennis courts, it was where the tennis courts over by B&D are at, in that little park. The list was so old. Okay, my house is 4,288 square feet. What they're offering me is $167,000 for it. I cannot find a place to move to. I mean, you can't buy, it comes to less than $40 a square foot. It came to $38.94 per square foot. You can't build a doghouse for $38.94 a square foot. My I have no place to move my stuff to. I can't move it for $3,000 either. I mean, I've got 3 semi-loads at least. I mean, even hiring my grandson to do it, I couldn't do it. But I have been looking and looking and looking for properties, not only in North Dakota, since our prices are higher with the oil bit. I've looked in Montana, I've looked in South Dakota, I've looked in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, that you cannot find a property anywhere comparable to mine for that amount of money. You're lucky to get a 1,100 to 1,200 square foot 2-bedroom house. So the city tells me that I don't need that space. My kids are growing. It doesn't matter. I've owned it since 1985. I've paid taxes on it. I've repaired it. I've stuck $100,000 into it since the flood. When I bought it, I paid $180,000 for my house. You're offering me less than I paid for it in 1985? That is my complaint. I have no place to move it to. I have no place to put my stuff. My son Jesse had a shop. He sold that to Keller's last year. He has no place to put my stuff. So where in the hell, excuse me, I didn't mean to say that. Where am I supposed to move to if they don't give me a comparable? Legally, we are supposed to get a comparable property, and we're supposed to be moved where it's a seamless transition to a move. There is no place I can move to for that amount of money. My house is an old church. The railroad built it when they came through in the 1880s. It was all built with railroad materials. It stood there that long. It'll stand another 100 years. It was all built with railroad materials. I've got railroad ties for wall supports and railroad tracks running up my basement walls, which is another thing. There's 50-pound rails running up my basement walls about every 10, 12 feet. There's a section of those down in the museum in Bismarck now. I took a piece down to be dated and left it there, and some railroad guy came in and was all freaking out because it's the oldest piece of track they found in North Dakota. So those tracks should be taken to the Railroad Museum. They shouldn't be just demolished somewhere. I mean, they're Civil War era. And so it isn't the fact that I'm objecting to anything. I've sent 2 letters to Zakian. I've got here a floor plan of my house. It's just a rough draft, but it shows that you cannot buy for the amount offered. I cannot purchase anything. So where am I supposed to move to? They tell me you can get a 2-bedroom or a trailer house. If I wanted that, I would have bought it 35 years ago. In the first place, I wouldn't have bought that house. I only had 1 son at the time. Well, 2. Billy was a baby. I don't like small houses. I'm extremely claustrophobic. As it is now, I've got a 30-foot living room.
Let's let her finish. Please have a seat.
So to tell me to move into a trailer house where it has bedrooms that you can't even get a bed and a dresser in, I won't do it. I can't do it. I couldn't handle it. I pass out in elevators. So that's my problem. It's not that I object to the acquisition. I don't even want to be there anymore. And the way Minot's gotten to be with the crime and everything, I don't want to be in Minot. I mean, up till the flood, my house was a McGruff house. It was a safe house for kids. We hadn't had the doors locked in 20 years. I had to go buy locks for the doors because we couldn't find a key when the National Guard came to chase us out. Since then, I've been broken into 5 times. So I can't say that I even want to live in Minot anymore. But there is nothing. There's nowhere in the state can you get a property even anywhere comparable. And granted, my house it was built in the 1880s, but since the flood, I had to replace all my plumbing, my wiring. I had to totally gut it. It had been built with railroad materials. They used bridge planking crisscross for my floors, and then 1.5 hardwood on top of that. I had to tear out all the walls, since it was a church first, they built the walls on top of that. I had to pull all my walls to get the 3 layers apart so I didn't have mold in between them, and then jack them up and put them back in place. So it isn't like it wouldn't stand for another 100 years. I don't want something that's going to rattle every time I walk across a floor. So, you know, it's 100 years old, but everything in it's new. Any studs or floor joists or anything that were cracked or rotted, we replaced them. The house is basically new. It's in a lot better shape than when I bought it 35 years ago. I mean, granted, from the outside it looks horrible, but I had new siding and windows, and with the street torn up 2 summers in a row, we couldn't get a lift in there to do the work and replace it. And then I got the notice that they were taking the house, so I didn't see much sense in having my son bring a crew over to do it when it was being replaced anyway. You know, I just don't agree with somebody arbitrarily saying your house is worth $167,000 when I paid more than that for it 35 years ago.
So, Ms. Ludson,
So given a fair, equitable amount where I could actually find a comparable property, I would have been out of there 2 years ago. But they haven't given me one. And the first letter I sent, I got a letter back from Zakian saying, well, you know, we didn't really say anything. The second letter I sent, I got no response from at all. And I also made a list of all comparable properties I could find. The cheapest one on here, and it's only 3,000 square feet, is $385,000. And it's still over 1,200 square feet less than I have in my house.
so Ms. Ludson, first and foremost, the acquisition process on many of these is never easy. In our packet that we were provided ahead of council meeting is 47 pages following the progress of this acquisition through the different letters that were sent, those that were received, those that no one was there to receive and notated, along
I was
with
working
all-
12 hours a day at Menards.
along with all of the legal processes to this point. The challenge we have is this has gone through the eminent domain process and has already been settled in court.
And I found out about that court 2 weeks later when I got a letter saying that it had already happened. I wasn't even notified of the court.
According to all of the documents substantiated, the entire process has been very thoroughly followed through by city staff and by City M. Smith, everyone involved. And the challenge we have here is that really what it points to is you have not been active in this process. And it really is difficult for me here to say you haven't been active, but everything here shows that you really have not been participating in either the voluntary acquisition or the eminent domain. And that, as a governing body, is really difficult for us to say the courts got it wrong, the staff got it wrong, the mail delivery got it wrong, everybody else got it wrong. Now, as it also pointed out, there's still some benefits that are available out there.
$167,000, which won't buy me even the 4 of the bedrooms in my house.
And I understand that you're not happy. My question is, and it's a very open-ended question, why weren't you able to participate in any of the very lengthy processes that took place over years before the court said 167?
The court hadn't said 167. That's the amount that CDM Smith gave. They weren't even in my house for 10 minutes when they went through it. Less than 10 minutes. I was home on a lunch hour when they went through my house. I asked them if they could come back later after I got off work. They said no. So they went through 18 rooms in 10 minutes.
And through that, with the court, they did agree and settled on that 167 with no argument, no opposition. That's the challenge we
I had
have.
written letters. Because I wasn't there in person is irrelevant. I didn't know about the court until after it was already done, and I got a notice of what the court had already done. So maybe that was one of the letters they couldn't get me for, but if I'm at work, they can't very well say that.
There are a couple of more programs that are still available above that 167 through the NDR, CDBG NDR program that can assist with this. But legally, our hands are tied because the eminent domain process has moved forward, and I would recommend.
So why is it that nobody in my neighborhood has been able to buy a comparable property? People down there have all wound up in living in either senior centers or trailer houses or renting. Nobody has bought a house without having to go out and take out a new loan. At my age, I'm not taking out another 30-year mortgage. I won't live to see the end of it. I won't live to see a quarter of it.
And we're only here to discuss yours today because I don't have the details of any others.
Well, I consider the lawyers I got are eminent domain attorneys. They didn't want to do a single residence. They usually do businesses. They will file a class action suit. Several of my neighbors agree to it. We're going to file a discrimination suit against the city for many things. It's been ongoing. I mean, even my water down there has not passed water quality in over 25 years, and nothing was done about it. We still have old lead pipes down there. So, I mean, all the people that have gotten cancer down in that neighborhood, I've already notified as many as I know and said, hey, we'll sue the city for it.
Ms. Lutzen, again, I sympathize. You've now made it clear that you're attempting to move forward with litigation. That does also very much limit our ability to carry on the conversation as a council. With pending litigation then, I would just look to the council if they have any other direct questions of you.
Well, I'm still wondering, what am I supposed to do with my stuff, and where am I supposed to move to when you're offering me less than half of what I can afford to buy comparable property?
I would recommend reaching out to Mr. Zakian and seeing what other funds, because there are other.
He's the
funds
one that
available.
told me that I didn't need that anyway because my kids were grown and I should just move into a trailer house.
Ms. Lutzen, that's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to other funds that are available through the CDBG NDR program to assist with the moving, or other funds that might be available for another acquisition. I would very, very much encourage you to reach out to him and take a look at those programs.
I reached out to him with letters, and all I got back was a bunch of platitudes that had no result whatsoever.
Sometimes, Ms. Lutzen, a face-to-face conversation goes a long way. I would recommend setting up a meeting with him and sitting down.
Because right now, well, this is the floor plan of my house. I'd like to know where anybody thinks that I can find something comparable.
So, Ms. Lutzen, I would encourage you to hold on to this and talk with Mr. Zakian about it.
I said
Because
no.
as the eminent domain process, again, is finalized, if you would go back to the podium, the legal process has already gone through the courts. That's the challenge, again, that we have. Just one moment, we'll finish up, and then we'll have you come up. Any other questions from Ms. Lutzen, or any other comments, Ms. Lutzen?
No, I just don't think it's right.
Okay.
I mean, this is extortion. That's all it is. Especially for a flood that didn't have to happen to begin with. It did not have to happen. I worked for Webster, Foster, and Weston. I've talked to the engineers that did the work in the 70s, and this did not have to happen.
If you would come forward and state your name. I'm assuming you're a relative.
Yes, my name is Jesse Lutz, and I'm Debbie's oldest son. I work construction. I've been kind of in the midst of this battle she's been going on with the city and with the CDM Smith here for a little while. For the most part, she's kept me in the loop of the proceedings that were going on. After she was given the one appraisal, I talked to her. I try to keep her reasonable about things because something has to change. She's still got a $30,000 loan that will be taken out of whatever she sells the house for. So that's leaving her $137,000 to move. I personally just heard about this, about these proceedings today at 4:30, and I just found out about the eminent domain because a friend of mine called me and had seen it in the paper. She knew about that, but I know for a fact she did not know about the court proceeding for eminent domain. She comes out to my house pretty much weekly to use my internet, and we talk and stuff. So I know for a fact she did not know about that. I do not know if there's any type of a hold that can be put on this eminent domain thing till she figures something out, because frankly, she has nowhere to go. My house is under construction currently. I did sell my shop last year. During the flood, I was housing 19 people at my place trying to help out. Right now, I don't have the room for it. The city should, I feel, should look at this a little bit deeper. It is 6 bedrooms, 3 baths, 2 kitchens. It's a very large house. It really is. And I've talked to her about some numbers that I felt would be reasonable. I'm a supervisor for Height Construction here in Minot and owned my own business for 15 years. I know what it takes to build something. So didn't really have much to say. Part of it was try to keep my mom calmer because she has a way of getting upset. And I hope that you guys all look at this and look at what you would be doing in the same circumstance, same situation. It's kind of a bugger. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz, and I would agree that it is certainly a bugger. The eminent domain process has already proceeded to its finality, and all of the proper procedures absolutely were followed. Mr. Zakian, if you want to shed a little bit of light on perhaps some process moving forward or other programs that are available, because she is here.
Sure. Mayor and members of the City Council, I want to echo what I know all of you have expressed many times and the mayor expressed tonight. This is never an easy process. It is an extremely difficult process. We have completed 174 of these acquisitions. None of them have been easy. Many have been in similar situations to the one that Ms. Lutzen is confronting. We have been able to work through all of them. Again, we are required to follow the federal law. We are stewards of taxpayer money. We need to protect it and make sure that it is appropriately spent. There are a couple of factual points I need to clarify before we leave here tonight. First of all, as you correctly pointed out, Mayor, this is a settled acquisition. The combination has been completed. The timeline to appeal has expired. The $167,000 for the house was deposited with the courts. Ward County had a claim for unpaid taxes, which I believe was around $10,000. So there is currently $157,000 remaining. As immediately upon our making this payment of $167,000, Ward County came in for 2019 back taxes and claimed that amount. The $30,000 that her son just referenced is not attached to the property, and therefore, to the best of our knowledge, there's been no claim made against the $157,000 that remains in the court. So at this point in time, if she so chose, and it's strongly recommended, she should go to the court and get the $157,000. Now, one other factual, and it's unfortunate because we do our best to try to engage everyone. As you well know, we make an initial offer. It is very clear when we make the initial offer that we're open to voluntary negotiations. Oftentimes, as you have seen, because some have come to you, we increase the ultimate agreed upon price. There is a cap. We cannot by law go above, but we can negotiate. I did receive one letter from her. I don't know about a second letter. And I did answer that letter. I do want to point out that that one letter stopped the process to some extent because she claimed in that letter that she had retained a Minneapolis law firm. And protocol says that as soon as you retain a law firm, we no longer deal with the property owner, we have to deal with the law firm. I did respond with a counter offer. She had made a request for in excess of $500,000. In my letter, which she referred to, I explained the reasons why that is not acceptable. I did increase our counteroffer to $187,000. I sent it to the attorney with a copy to her. I heard nothing from either. 45 days later, I communicated to the attorney. The attorney wrote me back and said, we have not and do not represent Ms. Ludson and have no relationship to her whatsoever. Please do not correspond with us. We then sent out a follow-up set of communications to Ms. Ludson, again encouraging her to negotiate based on the counteroffer. We never heard back from her. She never made a counter offer to our increased counteroffer. At one point in time, now this went on, as the mayor noted, we started this process with her in 2017, so this is not something that suddenly happened. We've been going through this process for 4 years. She was notified that we were going to take this to the council for authorization for eminent domain. We sent her an individual letter and a certified letter. It's what we do all the time. We did not get back her signing the letter, but we have a notation from the post office that someone in her house received the letter. We just don't know who. Once it was approved, we turned it over to our outside counsel. He made several attempts to serve her. This is the one extraordinary situation, which is unprecedented with this type of activity, where we actually authorized him to engage a private investigator to try to serve her with the papers, and he was not able to do so. There was a published legal notice put in the newspaper alerting anyone who was interested, including her, to the eminent domain. The case came. We came in with our initial offer, since there had been no response to the counteroffer, for $167,000. And that's why, and that was adjudicated. We did, and she has acknowledged it. We did send her a notice of the decision. She could have appealed it if she chose to. She didn't. So here we are today. So there is sitting in the courts, to the best of my knowledge, $157,000 available to her. We can still work with her, and we are still committed to working with her, even if you give this authorization tonight, which is a necessary step, unfortunately. We are still willing to work with her. I will do so on relocation options. She refers to not wanting $3,000. That is one of many options. There are other relocation options that she could be eligible for that would be more than $3,000. I will tell you that one of the underlying, again, for the sake of transparency, one of the underlying issues that we're going to need her to address is that when CDM Smith did visit her house in June of 2018, there was no power in the house. There were no utilities turned on. The water was turned off. The light fixtures were hanging from the wall, the ceilings and everything. The house is in disarray. There was no evidence there was actually a residence. The kitchen had no sink. I mean, there were a number of issues with the house. She was advised at that time that she'd have to establish that this is her residence in order to be eligible for more of the relocation benefits than otherwise. Let me make it clear that even if for some reason it cannot be established that this is her residence, she is still eligible for us to move her personal property to another location. If she is eligible, based on it being her primary residence, then we can also provide her with comparable funding for buying another house. The underlying issue there, and again, I'll be glad to talk at length with her, is that while the house is a certain square footage, it is a duplex. Under federal law, we cannot pay her for a duplex. What we can pay her for in a comparable fashion is that amount of square feet that are her living space. Now, for instance, just very quickly, if we find 3 comparable homes for, let's say, discussion purposes, 2,500 square feet, and the comparable homes come in at $180,000, $190,000, and she was paid $167,000. Let's say it's $190,000. The $23,000 differential, she is eligible to receive. That is called the differential payment on relocation, if it is her primary residence. The highest we have paid to date is $35,000. The average we pay for these comparable is around $10,000 to $15,000, and it's totally separate and apart from the acquisition costs. So again, there are a number of opportunities. I don't know her income, but we also have the Resilient Home Buyer Program, the forgivable second mortgage up to $60,000. If she will engage in the conversations and we can get reliable information, she may be eligible for that too.
Thank you, Mr. Zakian. Any questions for John at this time? It's a lot of information, John. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Lutzen, I would just very strongly, again, recommend a face-to-face conversation with this because there are programs that can greatly benefit you, I think, beyond what you had stated here as your only options. There are more options, and that conversation has to continue to find out your eligibility on that. And I know you're going to be eligible for a number of them, but we have to do the proof in the pudding, and that has to take conversation. We don't have a motion at this point. I would look to the council.
Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Ross.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve City Council, authorize outside counsel to put an end to this.
Motion to approve the recommendation, second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Last call. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to 7.3, the right turn on red prohibition on West Burdick Expressway at 16th Street Southwest and 6th Street Southwest, item 4429. The West Burdick Expressway traffic signal at 16th Street Southwest and 6th Street Southwest are currently in the process of being replaced as part of the City Project 4429, 2019 signal improvements. Engineering staff is proposing to install digital 4 no turn on red signals for these 2 traffic turn signal systems. Combining leading pedestrian intervals along with prohibiting right turn on the red has proven to be simple, low-cost safety countermeasures that can benefit pedestrians while having a minimal impact on vehicle traffic. 4 recommendations to council is to pass ordinance adding a right turn on red prohibition to the following locations: northbound 16th Street Southwest at Burdick Expressway, northbound 6th Street Southwest at Burdick, southbound 6th Street Southwest at Burdick, and westbound West Burdick Expressway at 6th Street Southwest.
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to approve. Is there a second? Second. Second by Alderman Ross. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Motion is approved. 7.4 is approval of job description and hiring a business systems analyst for the finance department. City is currently going through the process of implementing a full enterprise resource planning ERP software system, including modules for finance, payroll, human capital management, organizational assets, and utility and tax special billing. The intricate integration of these various modules require knowledge on the technical workings of each application, including associated internal business processes. During this ongoing implementation process, the finance director has recognized the need to have a dedicated staff person specialized in the application system, which is outside of the city's normal information technology areas. 2 recommendations to council is to approve the job description for business systems analyst and authorize the finance director to fill the position, and 2, recommend approval of the process ordinance to amend the budget to approve the use of the general fund cash reserves.
Move that.
Motion to approve by Alderman Patagula. Is there a second? Second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion on the motion. Alderman Patagula.
I wanted to support this. I was on one of the 2 committees that recommended the software systems. Mark was on the other, and it became apparent to me, given the complexity of the systems, this was going to take longer than expected and probably cost more. And I frankly was wondering if we really needed a systems consultant to help us, operations consultant, systems type person to help us through this. And I appreciate the efforts of staff to try to get by without one and save us some money, but it's obvious that the complexity and the time involved really calls for a full-time person here. So I'm, again, appreciative of their efforts to try to make do with what they have, and who they have, but I just don't see this as being feasible without the extra support.
Any further discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Alderman Janser.
Thank you. I think it's fair to point out here that this is increasing a part-time position that we already have to a full-time position. We're going from, a person who's already working to a more permanent full-time position, and I also will support this.
Thank you, Alderman Janser. Further discussion? Yes, Mr. City Manager.
I want to go on the record that I am supportive of this, and I understand this is exception to the normal processes, but I do want to be on the record that typically speaking, the addition or upgrading of positions is best handled through the budgeting process. I don't want to create the pattern of routinely coming with multiple department needs of addition or upgrading of positions outside of the budget process for the future. I do understand the circumstances with this. I'm supportive if the council chooses to support this, but again, I just want to be on the record that in the future, this process should be better handled through the budgeting process.
Alderman Patagula.
And I appreciate what the city manager has said. I think that's a very good practice to follow. This is one of those unusual exceptions, and I appreciate you making that point because this is an important one. We should follow that process unless there's some exceptional circumstance. Thank you for being so prudent in that regard.
Last call for discussion. Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Patagula.
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Pittner.
Yep.
Motion is approved. 7.5, modifying the process regarding permitting and licensing. The Operations Committee was tasked with reviewing the city's current permitting and licensing process and, if deemed necessary and appropriate, recommending modifications to ordinances and processes to improve the city's customer service and efficiencies relating to permit applications, processing, and regulating by providing a more user-friendly digital online permitting until a more permanent system can be implemented. 2 recommendations before council. Staff recommends approval of the attached ordinance revision, and number 2, staff recommends approval of the updated permit licensing applications.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Ross. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson.
Yes.
Pittner.
Yes.
Patagula.
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 7.6 is the engineering for citywide wayfinding signage. Wayfinding signage system has been recommended in a number of studies for the entire city and especially its central business district. A downtown wayfinding study was completed in September of 19. Similarly, designed signs become a recognizable feature and are part of the placemaking effort that not only provide directions to key locations such as the new hospital, ice rinks, and the North Dakota State Fairgrounds, but also point out key attractions and locations such as museum, universities, and the downtown. 3 recommendations to council is to approve the wayfinding engineering contract with Ackerman Esfold. 2, the council will approve the budget amendment ordinance to fund the contract. And 3, the use of sales tax improvement cash reserves.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve, second by Alderman Pittner. Mr. Rosenthal, do you have any comments?
Yeah. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I want to thank every member of the council for having already sat down with me and having a discussion. So this very short presentation is meant for the public to know as much as you do for just a few minutes investment of time here. Again, I think the mayor's described wayfinding signage. So the one thing that I would just mention, that it doesn't just help people know which way to go. It tells you you're there. It points to, as part of placemaking, it tells you you have a museum next to you. There's a museum maybe you haven't thought about, maybe if you're not from the area, or even if you're from the area, it brings things to your attention. Now, some of the work was done previously. I want to mention that I have met with Sevengers and with Lance Myers for doing this work. The work was partially completed a little bit more than a year ago, but it gives you an idea that they go along the major arterials. When this thing is in full use, this and these things on the list here, State Fair, City Hall, Library, Visitor Center, downtown, the ice arenas, the airport, all those things, the new Discovery Museum, will all be featured with the wayfinding signage. If good minds think alike, Alderman Padrigula and Alderman Ross both asked me the same question. It's a good question. Don't smartphones replace signs? They're an important augmentation to it, but I think this is roughly the same question I gave, same answer I gave, which is that the signs to help define the place. They help establish an image in the brand, and they make it, they're easier than typing in names. When you use a smartphone, it only tells you where the thing you've punched in. Wayfinding signage gives you the panoply of things that you might be looking at. Again, some locations, this happens to show downtown, but this would be throughout the city. These were some of the preliminary designs that were already done. What you see, it says DOT sign because that would mean that it would go along the Route 2 mostly. And then there would be a number of other signs, a district gateway on the far right on the top would be something for downtown. I think we might do a little better than that. But these are pretty comparable to the kinds of things that we would see in the preliminary design. I think the pedestrian kiosk, I think, could be upgraded because I think I would want to include electronic signage because of its ease of being changed. And so then to the final element here, there was a estimate on the construction for about $160,000. I think that number is going to be higher, as you know. The cost of materials has gone up quite a bit in the past year. But we do know that we do have the estimate for doing the engineering work to get it completed, which would include electrical passageways for doing electrical hookups for some of the signs. We'll come to the precise number of signs, precise locations. And so, although it says an estimate, we actually have a bid, and it comes in just under $70,000. And it comes from, that fund would come from existing funds that are earmarked for engineering. And that would, and then the final piece of this is, once we have that estimate, we would be back before you later this year to look toward budgeting for next year to do final implementation of the signs. So this is just for engineering at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Any questions for Economic Development Administrator? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We have a motion to approve. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
No.
Sitma,
Yes.
Dancer.
Alderman,
Dancer, did we lose you?
Yes.
Oh, there.
he was on
Yes.
mute. Motion is approved. 7.7 is the City Hall Program and Pre-Design Submittal 4466. City has hired JLG Architects to design the new City Hall building. JLG has sought input from the city staff regarding the amount of space needed to operate their departments both now and in the future. The needs were then summarized and presented to the Building Committee for their review. The committee's recommendation is summarized in the attached documents and will be presented here by JLG. The recommendations is to approve the program, space analysis, and authorize staff to proceed with the schematic design phase. We do have our city engineer, Mr. Lansmeyer, for some initial comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Tonight I have Doug Larson and Eric Hofer with me to give you a quick presentation on where we're at with our project. I mentioned at their selection here a month or so ago that we were going to have several check-in points with the city council and with the public to let them know where we're at in this project. This is one of those tonight. A very important step in the process. We're showing you what the space program looks like for our building, which means we've talked to individual departments. We've tried to understand what their needs are, communicated that through our building committee, and JLG has summarized that and helped create a document that helps explain how much space certain departments would need and starts the conversation on how that would fit in the building. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll have these gentlemen come up and walk you through that. If you have any questions, we are here to answer them for you.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer.
You're welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Councilman. My name's Doug Larson. I am the market leader for the Office of JLG Architects here in Minot, North Dakota. I'd like to say thank you for entrusting this job to us right off. Like Mr. Meyer said, we are in the process. We just completed the pre-design, and I'm going to turn the presentation of the pre-design packet over to Eric Hofer, who is the project manager for JLG on this project.
Good evening, Mr. Hofer.
Good evening. Thank you. Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Lance, for the introduction. Again, my name is Eric Hofer. I'm with JLG Architects, project manager for this project. And I just wanted to give you all a quick update on the process thus far. For the past 6 weeks or so, we've had a chance to meet several times with the building committee and with department heads and staff related to this project. You have a pretty detailed packet, document in your packet that goes into more detail than I'll go into today. I just wanted to hit the high level points here. How do I switch slides here? There we go. Okay, so we started out this process with, again, meeting with the building committee and with department heads and tried to identify what does success look like for you and what are the goals and aspirations for your project. And these are the 6 items that kind of rose to the top that everyone agreed if we accomplish these things, we will have achieved a successful project. So those things are, the City Hall should be welcoming, should encourage civic engagement. We want to be great stewards of taxpayer dollars. We want to stay on budget, obviously. We want the City Hall facility to attract top talent. It should be a recruitment tool so that you can attract the best staff. We want it to be collaborative, foster collaboration amongst departments. We want it to be flexible, able to adapt to the ever-changing technological and staffing needs. And ultimately, we want it to be user-friendly. We want the City Hall to be a one-stop shop for the citizens of Minot. And we revisit these goals and aspirations at the beginning of every building committee meeting, and we'll constantly revisit them throughout the process just to make sure we're staying on course. Really high-level schedule. So right now, we're at the end of the pre-design phase. Each of those stars is a touch base point with the City Council. We'll want to come and give you an update on budget and schedule and the scope of the project. We'll do that, again, between each phase as we ask for approval to move on to the next one so that you understand where we're at in the process. And then once we get into construction, which we're anticipating to be late this fall, we would meet with the City Council, ideally on a every month or every other month at the most, kind of set up that cadence to keep you updated and up to speed on the construction process. This is just a high-level summary of the program. This is kind of the meat of the document that's in your packet. This goes into much more detail. It'll outline every single space that for each department. But kind of the gist of this is we have a building that the city purchased in the old Wells Fargo building downtown. It only has so many square feet. It's about 45,000 square feet. So what we were tasked with and what the building committee was tasked with was to balance the needs and the wants and make sure we have a program that is going to work for City Hall, but fits in the building, most importantly. And we did that by, we met with each department head individually, one-on-one. We sent out questionnaires, met with the building committee several times. So we feel that everyone was very involved, and the process was pretty open and transparent in that regard. And I think we've landed at a place where everyone's comfortable with. We do have two options here. One of them brings each of the departments that you see here, it brings all of them into the new facility. And as you can see, we're showing that actually doesn't quite fit into the existing building. So we would need to find some efficiencies during the design process if we were to move forward with that option, which we think we can find. It's just a matter of having to make some decisions. Option two brings all of those departments except for community development and engineering, which are currently in the Public Works building, to the new building. And that one, as you can see, leaves us with a little bit of wiggle room, room for future growth, or room for the program to kind of morph a little bit as we get into the design. But the bottom line is we wanted to make sure that we kind of started from scratch on the program, get everyone involved, make sure everyone's voice is heard, and I think that's what we've done here. These are just visual representations of the program. You can kind of see how each department relates to one another in terms of its relative size. So this is just broken down by department, and this is all of the individual spaces that you'll see every line item in that program represented as. And finally, the budget. The budget was established during the building assessment phase when we were looking at both the Wells Fargo building and the Big M building. The city ultimately decided, obviously, to purchase the Wells Fargo building. And this is the same number that was in that assessment. So we're working off that $12.8 million total project budget. That's going to include the construction cost, soft costs such as furniture and equipment, fees, things like that. And also includes a contingency, which we want to make sure we keep in the budget to account for unknowns that might pop up along the way. It just makes good budgeting sense to do that at this point. We'll continue to refine this budget as we start design. At this point, we haven't started design. We were just kind of establishing the parameters that the design needs to respond to. So we'll continue to refine this. We'll continue to update you as we do so. And one thing I did want to point out, one major component of this project is to move the dispatch or the public safety answering point, the call center, from where it's currently located in the police department to the new facility. That has a major equipment component to it that we frankly at this point aren't fully. We need to engage more consultants. We need to engage the city's vendors for that equipment to really understand the cost implications. So that's one thing that we'll be diving into right away as we get into the design process. So with that, I would just like to open it up for questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Hofer. strongly recommend, and I have no doubt that the great folks at the Minot Police Department and the rest of the staff that are always great about finding grants, especially when it comes to emergency response, anything, that we continue to engage those different avenues for those types of let's call it technologies and other infrastructure that are going to be needed for that. So a great way to capitalize on monies that may otherwise be able to use towards, let's call them inflationary construction costs, what we've seen go up from 2020. So any questions for Mr. Hofer at this time?
Mayor.
Alderman Ross.
Just one quick question. When you brought up the moving of the dispatch center, the unknowns of the cost and the moving, depending on where that number or those numbers come along, I mean, and I'm not going to hold you to it, but is that going to, could you possibly see that adversely affecting our bottom line?
Well, at the moment, we're operating under the assumption that the $12.8 million is the bottom line. So we would just adjust other parts of the project to make that fit. And from my understanding, that is pretty much a requirement based on the funding, or it is a requirement based on the funding, so that needs to happen.
Okay.
Again, it's just a matter of, when we started this process, there was questions of, well, can we salvage anything and move it over? But after we've dug into it a little bit more, it's starting to look more and more like, in order to make sure that you don't have any down, we can't let that service go down because it's a public safety, we need that to be in place. So logistically moving something over would likely result in some downtime. So that kind of doesn't seem like a viable option at this point. So it's like build new, all new equipment in the new facility, but then perhaps still have the one at the existing facility as a backup should you ever need it. It's kind of the way we're looking at it right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Further questions? Alderman Patagula, and then we'll go to Alderwoman Olson.
I guess I'd rather wait till Lisa spoke first because she was on the committee, and that may affect what I have to say.
All right.
Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you. My comments are just brief. I just want to thank Eric and his team so far as being part of that committee. It's been a very thoughtful process so far. It's been, what he's been able to show us this evening is very brief. We spent a number of hours talking about a number of details related to this. And I'm very satisfied with the process so far and look forward to it continuing because I think we're going to have a great product in the end.
Thank you, Alderwoman Olson. Alderman Patagula.
Thank you. I wanted to make some points for the record. First of all, I just received this on Friday, and I've not had the chance to go through it. I promise to go through it tomorrow to the best of my ability and to dictate a very focused response, because I think it's a very important project for the city in many ways. Like Lisa said, so far what I'm seeing, I'm impressed with the project. I'm pleased with it. There are a couple points I will make privately, but generally I'm pleased with it. One thing I wanted to point out is that we recently received, in fact today we received a letter from the Downtown Business and Professional Association asking us to consider putting in public restrooms into that facility. That's something that the economic development people downtown in the past have studied and have recommended that they be made available somewhere. And it's pretty much a national scandal compared to other countries where people take into account things like that, nursing stations for children, for mothers, things like that. I don't know how feasible it is to put in at this point into this particular building, because I think there are safety and other issues, but I think that's something we need to be looking at. I'd like to ask you to look at that, because that is being requested by the people downtown who'd be most affected. Second bit of input I'd offer at this point is to ask you to look at seriously the possibility of some environmentally sensitive features, perhaps a green roof. That is a heck of a big roof, and I know that one of the trends in design these days is to build things like gardens, or at least put grass or something to reduce the heat load and to allow more natural processes to take place. I've talked with the city engineer about the possibility of solar panels. He tells me that it's not a real good place, but I'd ask you to at least look at that possibility, because green is the way to go. It's the way of the future, and I'm confident that as standards in the engineering and architectural fields change and develop, that you will be taking account of the latest developments and the latest changes. So I think that personally is quite an important thing for me, that we have an environmentally responsible building. As part of that, this may be more of a personal preference, but we've been told that new windows will be necessary. And I would really encourage you to look at the possibility of openable windows, or at least having small portions of windows that can open. I think now with COVID, we're learning the importance of adequate ventilation. I think there's psychological benefits to having fresh air. Every engineer, every architect I've ever spoken with has told me that's a crazy thing. It screws up the HVAC system. You can't do it. You shouldn't do it. It's not efficient, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I understand that. But if you could at least put in some ability to have natural fresh air without having to go through all the filters and pumps and everything. For example, in my wife's office building, everything is shuttered and sealed, except every office has a little tiny window that you can slide open if you need to. And it really helps when there's been a fire or something, or smoke, or an unpleasant odor from like a light ballast or something, or a heating system failing. It's really nice to be able to get some fresh air in there and not have to set up fire department fans and things like that. So if you could at least explore that possibility. I also want to point out, too, that I think there needs to be a balance between security and safety. Unfortunately, the world is getting crazier. People are getting more bizarre in their behavior. We're seeing more acting out behavior, assaultive behavior, murderous behavior. And that's affected, I think, direct and increasingly at public officials and public buildings. And I think we owe it to our employees to keep them safe and to keep ourselves safe and anybody who frequents our buildings. The other side of it, I think, is in a democracy, buildings need to be accessible, they need to be open. And we're seeing this conflict played out at the highest level with the United States Capitol. And I would just encourage you to try to balance those, and I will be offering some specific suggestions. One of the things we've talked about with staff is having specific rooms where people can go and meet with staff and conduct their business and yet not have access to all the private areas where there are security and safety issues. We have sensitive documents, we have employees working, we have valuable equipment. We can't just let people have free range access to the building. On the other hand, I think it is a structure that people paid for, the people own. It is the people's city hall, and there needs to be some reasonable kind of access to it. And some of the design things I've seen very briefly, skimming your documents, look very reasonable, and I'm sure you're familiar with those standards. The last comment I'd make at this point is that obviously the Central Dispatch Center has to be the priority for the safety of the community, for the safety of the area, also as a precondition for us getting the $74 million. Right. I'm a forensic psychologist too, so I'm somewhat familiar with threat issues and things like that. And I know that's a very stressful job, and they need to have access to very good conditions. And I'm pleased to see, as Tom was, or somebody over there was pointing out that, or I think you were pointing out actually, that we may have to start fresh. It'll be expensive, but given the costs of downtime, any downtime in the facility, we're really going to have to start over again in a sense. And I think that's the proper way to go from my point of view. So I think the safety and the security of that facility, its operations, the people who work there, has to be a high priority. And it may be an engineering challenge to really, architectural challenge to really give them some of the things they say they want, and I think they need from a behavioral standpoint, but that pose some significant security issues. So far I'm pleased with what I see. I'm glad you'll be coming back regularly to give us input and to get our input, and just encourage you to be creative and to think outside the envelope. I don't mean to channel our former city alderman, Josh Walski, who always encouraged us to think outside the envelope and have these wonderful, creative, ecologically sensitive proposals and ideas. But a lot of what he said was right, that we need to take a good, hard look. And I'm sure as trained and professional architects and designers and planners who will do that. And I guess I just want to kind of give voice to that group of people who say, let's think it through carefully and let's make it as green, as sensitive to the environment, not just the physical environment, but the work environment, the people who have to work there, as we can. But so far so good, and I'll offer some more specific comments later. Thank you.
Mr. Hofer, just to add one last maybe tie-in, where ecological and economic meet, it may also be prudent to take a look at whatever ideas aren't met within the City Hall design. There's a very large structure right next door that could very well be the other aspect of that, where some of them could be met. So we're not asking for a second design by any means, but ideas within that process.
I would add one more thing. I'm glad you're placing an emphasis on that. It's actually part of our process in terms of green design, energy usage in particular. We'll build an energy model of the building where we're able to test out different things like solar panels or like new energy efficient windows. and understand what the payback might be on that in the long term in terms of energy savings, and then compare that to what the upfront cost is to see if it's something that the budget can support. So we're actively doing that as part of this.
Alderman Janser, do you have a question or just getting some feedback? Hearing nothing. Any other questions at this time for Mr. Hofer? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We do have a recommendation. Remind me, do we have a motion at this time yet? We do not.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to approve, second by Alderman Ross. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion? Mr. City Manager.
Just for point of clarity, you've had two options presented. So is the motion for one specific option or to continue analyzing both? Or
Thank you.
how are we proceeding with that?
Thank you for that clarification. I would look to the motion maker on option one, option two, or are we proceeding with a parallel look at this time?
I have to pull up the memo here in front of me.
Just for reference, option one essentially brings over, for the lack of a better term, engineering and everybody, where we don't quite have enough space. Option two is bringing all of those entities under one, with the exception of engineering. I'm going to look to Lance here for some clarification.
Phone a friend. Mr. Mayor and Alderman Pittner, I think at this point, because we're so early in that design process, we'd feel comfortable with proceeding down with both options at this point. And hopefully within a couple of weeks, when some of these pieces start to come together, we can come back to you with a better option.
Okay.
What he said.
Motion is as such on a parallel path to come back before and then decide on which direction to go from there. I don't think we're changing the motion, so I won't look for an agreement from the second unless we need one. Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Alderman, let's go Alderwoman Olson and then over to Alderman Patagula.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do agree with our city engineer at this point. I did share this comment at the building committee, and I'll share it up here as well. After having been up here for a number of years, we did make a significant funding. We significantly funded an addition to Public Works in order to accommodate the employees that we had out there. It would be my preference at this time that engineering would stay at the Public Works building. I'm certainly open to conversation about that, but I think that with the addition that we made out there, I think that it just makes sense for them to stay. But again, I'm open to different ideas.
Alderman Patagula.
I would also second Lisa's comments. It might be nice to have everybody under one roof, but conceptually to me it makes more sense to have engineering with the other people, particularly with the amount of money we've invested in the other facility. There was one thing I was going to say. It was when these proposals first came out a couple of years ago, there was something that was quite controversial that was included in the very, very preliminary, very rough kind of thinking out loud, basically, and that was an exercise room for staff. And that generated some heated discussion and some concern on the part of some of us and some people in the community, and that is no longer part of the plan. I think you could make a case for, wellness and things like that. But to me, I'll be very frank, that stuck out as a lightning rod, as something we really didn't need, especially when we're running short, especially when there are all these other fitness facilities in town, some of which are commercial. I'm not sure we should be competing with them. But that one potential irritant, at least to me, has been removed. So that's a very good thing. The other thing, I guess, it wasn't an irritant, but I had asked the previous city manager to explore our needs for storage of data, of paper. One of the things, if you wander through City Hall, you see all these file cabinets, and I don't think that ever got done before he left, but some of the initial thinking about the design was we needed a lot of space to store paper, and there are ways of digitizing it. Obviously, they would cost money, and we never got to the point of getting expense estimates on that, but that might be one way to economize and save, for some money to digitize these things, we would need the space. So I would encourage the architects also to think about that.
And certainly we will look to the city manager and staff down the road for other ideas as we progress forward with this entire process. Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. As I can appreciate Alderwoman Olson and Alderman Padrigula's comments and keeping staff out at Public Works I would actually take the opposite opinion. I would rather them move downtown. I think the more staff we can have downtown and engaging in downtown and interaction from the public with departments downtown and bringing people if they need someone from engineering or they need someone from community development, I think it's only a benefit to this project and what we're trying to achieve. But again, I'm open to either way, and it's a difference of opinion, but just wanted that to be known.
We'll have some time to consider. Further discussion? Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion is approved. The next item is 7.8, the city flag policy. The city manager was tasked to bring a proposed policy regarding commemorative flags flown on city property back to the council for consideration. City attorney and city manager have done some research regarding the matter and have drafted a potential policy for the council's consideration. Both attachments do outline the proposed, let's see here, they do outline the different policy and policy guidelines associated with that.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Patagula.
I move that we postpone discussion of this item until one of our meetings in May. I was asked by Alderwoman Evans to make this motion, and I told her as a courtesy to her that I would. I feel that everyone needs to be at the table to talk about this, and she certainly was a very important and driving force in getting this issue to come to the fore. So I would move that we postpone the discussion to a time certain, one of the two May meetings, to give her a chance to be here and for all of us to have a discussion and come to a meaningful consensus.
Your motion is to table until no earlier than the first meeting in May. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure the difference between table and postpone, but I would like it considered definitely one of the meetings in May.
Looking for a second on the motion to postpone.
Second.
Second by Alderman Pittner, and I'm going to look to the attorney as postpone and table the exact same verbiage. One is debatable, maybe the other is not.
Mr. Mayor, they're both considered the same under our
They are.
ordinance, and
Thank
they
you.
can both be debatable.
We have a motion and a second to table the item until no earlier than May. The item is not debatable. Please call the roll.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
No.
Sitma,
No.
Janser,
No.
Olson,
No.
Pittner.
Yes.
Motion to table fails.
Mr. Mayor?
Alderman Ross.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve city manager's recommendation number 1, that we just fly 3 flags in front of City Hall.
Second.
Second.
Motion and a second under, and I do need clarification under the policy guidelines, as there is A through F outlined in the second memo within item 1. And for consideration, maybe I would look to our city manager for some details so the motion can be refined.
Yeah, so what you have before you and in the council packet is first and foremost a memo which outlines 4 different options that the city attorney and I have researched in looking at similar policies throughout the country and how various communities have handled these. Those 4 categories come under the first option, which Alderman Ross has just made the motion regarding, which is a common practice across the nation, which would be limiting only the 3 flags, the United States flag, the appropriate state flag, and the city flag, to be flown on city property. No other flags would be allowed through that process. The second option, and I apologize if I get this out of order, I don't have it directly in front of me right now. The second option would be allowing a community space to be created. This would be off of city property, but would allow there to be a public place that somebody else would own that would get away from the freedom of speech rights and those types of things, that it would allow other flags to be flown, but the city would have no jurisdiction over that. That would be on private property. Option 3 is to create what's often referred to as a freedom of speech space. You can have flags, you can allow monuments and different things in a freedom of speech space, but it's all or nothing. So everyone can be there and participate. If it's a space, anyone can fly any type of flag or put up any type of monument in that situation. And then the fourth option would be what is considered a governmental speech phase, where it's been found in court cases. The city of Boston actually had a challenge on this, and it was upheld by the Supreme Court, where the city does have a right to freedom of speech. And so you can create a policy that allows you to exercise your governmental speech to fly or support different commemorative flags as the council sees fit. And again, in the memo, there are links to other city policies and drafts that either define a specific process, an open public process on how the council deliberates and makes the decision as far as which commemorative flags are allowed on city property, exercising governmental speech, or in some cases delineating specific flags and times at which they will be flown and is very specific. In relation to that, I was directed to draft a policy that would allow for commemorative flags to be flown on city property, and so that is the policy you have in front of you. That includes all of those options. Should the council choose to go with option one, which has been the motion on the table currently, I would recommend that sections D and E be struck from that policy. I do recommend that you still adopt a flag policy, but by striking D and E, that would remove the commemorative flag language as well as the other governmental flags, and that would limit the policy to only the United States flag, the state flag, and the city flag to be flown on city property. I'd be happy to answer any questions as follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager, for the clarification. For the folks that were following at home on the first attachment, the description on 2 and 3 were flip-flopped, but it's well outlined, so I think everybody could follow along. Look back to the motion maker.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the clarification, Mr. City Manager. I would go with, if I could amend my motion to strike D and E, but to include under the number 2 policy guidelines, Section A, Section B, and Section C.
And I'm assuming F as well, only looking down as otherwise, unless otherwise allowed, authorized as provided in this policy, no flag shall be displayed.
Yep, I agree.
Just to be
Mayor,
clear.
could we have that projected, please? I don't have a computer, I can't follow.
Okay.
Getting complicated.
Derek, do we have that ability to pull up the attachment that is 3763 from our agenda?
He said, why not?
Okay, give him just a
The
moment.
magic words, why not, why not?
For the folks that are at home or in the audience, option 1 reads adoption of a policy that limits flags on the city property to the U.S. flag, state flag, and city flag. This option is the most conservative route and is the most legally defensible. Many cities throughout the country have adopted the similar policies. As Derek is pulling up, number 2, I believe, is, no, you do have the right one up. Thank you, Derek. So option A shows the compliance with the state flag. Option B is the half-staff protocol. Guideline C, pre-approved flags. Striking D is the ceremonial flags. Striking E is striking the commemorative or organizational flags. And keeping F is the unauthorized flags. With a lot more detail under all of that.
Thank you.
The motion has been made by Alderman Janser. Alderwoman Olson was the second on that. Do you concur?
Yes, I do.
We have a motion and a second discussion on the motion. Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I definitely have spent a lot of time pondering this and trying to determine what I felt was the best for the city and the best for our citizens. And that's a difficult balance right now. I personally have not had any issues with any of the flags that we have flown. In fact, I was one of the first people that made the request for the first Juneteenth flag to be flown. And I'm glad that I made that request, and I'm glad that we did that. I supported the flags that that we have flown, even though other citizens have found offense with that. But my fear is that we're gonna go down a slippery slope. And it's going to be difficult to determine, as a council, what flags should be flown. I think there's going to be division when we start having these discussions. And I don't want to create that situation. I wholeheartedly support the idea of a community flagpole, and I hope that there is a way that someone takes the charge on this, and these flags can be flown so that people can have kind of, what's the best word? They'll feel represented by the flag that is being flown. But I just don't think it can happen on city property. So I think that the motion that Alderman Ross made is the most prudent policy for us to move forward with.
Alderman Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I made the motion simply because as a city council, we're tasked with dealing with city property, whether it's protecting city property or just dealing with city property. I made that motion initially, but I also made it in the hopes to see what this community can do when they pull together. We have so many different entities out there and so many entities that want to fly a flag. This is your opportunity to sit down with people you may not agree with. It may be an opportunity to sit down with people that you would call a bigot. It's an opportunity for you to sit down, come together, find a space where the community can come together and celebrate each and every organization. We're going to deal with the city property and the city land. Now it's your turn to deal with some community land. And I task you to see that, and I task you to do that, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you as a community can come up with. That's why I'm in favor of this. Thank you.
Further discussion? Further discussion. Alderman Patagula.
I will support Tom's motion for several reasons, and I want to explain why. Generally, I would endorse everything that Lisa has said. There are a couple perspectives I want to offer. First of all, I'm very, very leery about going down the road of government speech that I think has a authoritarian, ultimately totalitarian tone to it. I'm really reluctant to do that. I think the city in ways can speak, obey the speed limit, recycle your trash, pay attention to not using too much water to water your lawn or whatever. But I think if it goes beyond those specific, very basic kinds of common sense suggestions, I'm very uncomfortable with that. The second point I'd like to make is that I'm not so much concerned about controversy, although I think Tom makes a very good point, that we should focus on what keeps us together and what unifies us, and trying to work out compromises, trying to work out deals. I think that's very important. But my primary concern about in that area is that I'm not sure that the city, any city, should be in the business of promulgating views or even giving people a space to talk to whatever. That's already there. I mean, if people want to gather on the steps of City Hall, they can do that. I suppose if they want to picnic, I think they might even run into some trouble if they wanted to camp. But I think short of that, if they want to march, if they want to protest, if they want to have a sit-in or whatever, those options are already there to them. So in a way, I'd either favor the most conservative or the most radical one. But I just don't know that, again, it's our job to facilitate speech. It's the news media's job. It's the newspaper's job. If you want to spread a message, you can stand on the corner of Burdick and Broadway and hand out leaflets. You can send tweets. You can use social media. You can use the internet. I think there's so many ways of people to communicate and disseminate information and opinions. And I just don't know that that's the proper role for the city government. I think it's our job to keep the streets safe and clean, to provide clean water, to enforce our laws, to keep our buildings safe from fire. I just don't know that communications is part of that. I think private enterprise can do that a lot better, and private institutions. This notion of a free speech zone, I mean, in a way it makes sense, but again, the point is we already have one. And I don't know that we need a special place for it. I always thought that this document guaranteed us the right to speak anywhere freely, as long as it's not libelous, as long as it's not seditious. So in a way, it's very strange for me, because I think every space is a free speech place, and it should be that way. And if we start confining free speech to certain locations, if we start as a city government making restrictions, even seemingly obvious restrictions like not endorsing violent or racist kinds of speech, that is a problem. That does lead us down a slippery path. So, and I think and frankly, I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of symbols very often, and I think we can accomplish a lot more. And I know for some people these symbols are important. A flag is important. Like Lisa, I didn't object to any of the flags we've flown, but I think there are better ways of achieving what we want sometimes. If we're concerned about the rights of LGBTQ people, maybe what we need to do is pass an equal rights ordinance, regardless of what Bismarck or Washington does. If we're concerned about the environment, rather than running an eco flag or a Earth Day flag, maybe we should get our own house in order in terms of greater energy efficiency and push harder and quicker to get recycling. If we're concerned about equal rights for individuals of a certain skin color or indigenous people, I think there are a lot of things we can do to make our employment processes open and inviting to people, and our community open and inviting. So I recognize that symbols are important for people, but I think actions besides drawing up symbols are more important, and that's what I'd rather we focus on. And that's where we get back to what Tom was talking about trying to forge a consensus, about trying to forge an agreement, about trying to understand each other. So I think in some ways the flag issue is a red herring. For me at least, the flag isn't as important as what we do in our day-to-day lives and in our day-to-day business practices as a city. So for all of these reasons, again, I don't want my opposition to flags to be interpreted as an opposition to some of these causes, but I really don't want to be in the position of deciding what's racist or violent or approved or disapproved. I think that's highly problematic, and I think the safest, from a theoretical standpoint, not of avoiding controversy, but the safest position from a theoretical posture is to just stick to the business of government, stick to the business of city government, be modest in our expectations, and to do what we're here to do. And as signs of our identity, as signs of our shared background, to fly those three flags and leave it at that.
Further discussion. One point that I think, going to elaborate on just a little bit. If we take a look back into the early days of Minot, we all know the Norwegian flag. There's a lot of other Scandinavian heritage flags that represent people from all different nations. But I think the more profound piece is that so many people have come together in this country under one flag, that it is important to remember that. It does represent all of us. And whether that's the United States, the state of North Dakota, or the city of Minot. We've taken a look at a lot of other communities around the country that have moved towards the community flagpole, so that each group, and not picking out any one group as the cause or leading reason, but groups have come together. And to Alderman Ross's and Alderman Patagula, Alderwoman Olson's point, there needs to be a common ground to come together and talk about disagreements. Find the common ground. I think moving this direction helps move away from that controversy, division, to conflict, and helps drive the message. Because it is going to be up to all groups, not one group, but all groups, to come together to find the common ground. Who's going to host the community flagpole? That's not our job. But find that common ground so that each group, individual, can have that opportunity. And I know this community can come together to put it together. So I'm confident with voting in favor of this and the confidence of the community moving forward with that common ground. Further discussion on the motion. Final call for discussion. Seeing none, motion is to approve. Again, this is option 1, inclusive in the A, B, C, and F under 76 7663 under the guidelines. Please call the roll.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Motion is approved. We go to 7.9 now, the budget amendment for the community survey and facilitator. In fiscal year 2020, $60,000 was budgeted for the professional services to do some visioning planning with council and staff and to conduct a community survey. Given the transition of the city manager position and COVID, these priorities were not accomplished. Some of the money was used on other needs and the remainder was unspent and rolled over into the general reserve fund. Recommendation is to approve the ordinance amending the 2021 annual budget to allocate funds and conduct a community satisfaction survey and to have a professional facilitator services for a meeting with council and management team. Prior to taking a motion, I would look to our city manager for detail.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council members, since coming on board, as I've met with many of the council, staff, et cetera, it has continued to come up as a common assessment that there is a need to have some sort of a facilitated process to help us have some conversations, help us to prioritize some things, and help us to work through some challenges that still exist after recent events and transitions and those types of things. And so I am recommending that we do move forward with an amendment. I have sought out quotes from a couple of facilitators. I do think it's important that we do have a facilitator that specializes in helping city councils and city staff members work through similar issues. And I think experience matters here. I am not one typically to be very supportive of spending significant amounts of money on these types of processes. However, I think given some of the recent history and some of the challenges that I've observed here for our organization going forward, I do think that this is money well invested to help us all get on the same page and help us to have some needed conversations so that we can move forward. So the current budget amendment is taking into consideration my recommendation that we move forward with the Novak consulting firm to assist with a 2-day workshop with the council, facilitated workshop to work through several items. There will also be a process in place for the consultant to work with each of the council members individually to help you have your voice and identify some things that you feel as a council member the council needs to discuss as part of this process, and those will be incorporated into that. The company is led by Mrs. Novak, who is very highly well respected within the city management profession and has helped do this process for many very progressive and professional communities throughout the country. And also in partnership with this is the addition of Dr. Nalbandian, John Nalbandian, who actually was one of my professors when I was at the university, very highly respected both in the academic field and in the practitioner field, and has also done many of these processes with councils and staffs going forward, although he will primarily be focused on helping with the council portion of this process. And I actually utilized him for a facilitated process when I was in Warrensburg. We had some similar challenges and issues to try and overcome there, and he was very influential in helping the council have some meaningful conversation and move forward on some areas of friction for the council. The second part of this recommendation has to do with community survey. I know I talked about this when I interviewed. This is a process I've implemented in a couple of the communities that I have served in. I think it's always important that we get good data to help us measure how successful we're doing, how well we're meeting the priorities of the community. The question always is how do you get that voice in a meaningful way? And one of the best ways to do that is through a statistically valid survey. So you have two quotes there from two different companies. The first one being the ETC Institute, and the second one being Polco. ETC is the company that I have used in the past in the two previous communities. I'm very familiar with their work and the processes that they go through and the end product. They also have a dashboard, which would allow us to put the data out in a usable way to the public through our website once we have those results in. And so I'm recommending for that component as well. POLCO is also very highly recommended. Actually partners with the International City Management Association in doing these surveys for communities throughout the country. At the end of the day, my recommendation comes down to a couple of things. The first one, and some of the options they included a presentation, either virtually or in person, back to the council once the survey is completed. I felt their quote for an option for doing a virtual presentation was a bit higher than ETC. And I also liked the dashboard concept with ETC as well. POLCO does have some format of that as well, but you only have a 12-month access to it going forward. And so at this point, my final recommendation is to move forward with the budget amendment with my recommendation of using Novak Consulting for the facilitation services and the ETC Institute to help conduct the survey. Pending council approval, the process for the survey would be is we would begin working on developing the survey instrument, and that should be done by the end of this summer. And then the survey would be conducted over the next couple of months, and then we should have the survey results back with a presentation to the council by the end of this calendar year, around the holidays, early winter timeframe. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council has.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Any questions? Alderman Patagula.
I'd like to move that, please.
And to approve the recommendations of Novak and ETC Institute by Alderman Patagula, second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion or questions on the motion? Alderman Patagula.
I just wanted to say that these were two things that have been very important to me, and I've worked hard, not very successfully, I guess, until now, to see them adopted. I think it's absolutely critical that we have a process for bringing the council together with the city manager and giving us a better sense of direction in terms of how to go about our business. I think it's critical that the executive staff, the city manager's team, have the same opportunity. I think it's very, very important that we start looking systematically and carefully and objectively at what the citizens of the Minot think of the services they are receiving, and I think a community survey would be a very good step. We've already had a couple mini ones. We had one, for example, on the recycling issue, which was very informative and helped change the thinking of some of us. I think these really are very important items, and I'm pleased to see Harold applying his expertise and his experience in the city management field to identify what seem to be like very, very credible purveyors of services. I'm glad we're following through with this, and I would strongly support the idea of looking at things more systematically and carefully.
Further discussion? Alderman Pittner.
Just a clarification, did we have a date set? I know there was a date referenced at our workshop.
Are you referring to the dates for the council workshop?
Yes.
That would be June 11th and 12th, and then there would be a return for a facilitated day with the management team in mid-July.
Thank you.
One aspect of this that is also important for the community. We continue to talk about leaders stepping forward in the community into different roles, maybe not elected aldermen or mayor or commissioners or what have you, school board members. This could very well be some great insight as well when it comes to community leadership expectations and realistic roles. As we'll be meeting as a council, this absolutely would be open to the public, but also reviewable in the future. So it's a great tool not just for us, but for the rest of the community as well, for consideration on whatever roles they may or want to consider moving forward. Further discussion? Seeing none, the motion is to pass the recommendations of Novak and ETC. Please call the roll.
Padragula.
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Pittner.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to the end of our Section 7 for actionable items into number 8, personal appearances. This is an opportunity for anybody to come forward and speak on any item that is or is not on our agenda. I would ask that you keep the comments to 5 minutes and state your name and city of residence, please.
Hello, my name is Annette Menham. I am a resident of Minot, North Dakota. This is Austin Stensby. He's a resident of Minot as well. We are here representing Minot State University, Native American Center, Native American Club, here inviting you all to our events next week. I shared with the city clerk the posters. I didn't think I should bring them, hand them out with COVID stuff, so let me just quick give an introduction of what we have going on. And then that way the city has an opportunity as well to hear what we have going on, and maybe they can attend. But all of this is on our website at Minot State. April 29th, we will have a teepee teaching from the Plains tribes. We have Mr. Richard Street from Spirit Lake Nation coming, and he will do a teaching about the significance of the teepees, and then we will raise it on our campus. April 30th, we have Okeo-Nishishin garden gathering. That means Earth is beautiful. Minot State's Red and Green School is organizing 3 community gardens this summer. This is continuing from last year. One that honors the Mandan Hidatsa Rikwa Nation, one that honors the Ojibwe from the Turtle Mountains, and a simple pollinator garden. And this is across from Model Hall on University Avenue. We will be starting at noon on that day. We have music and food, and we have a creation story from the creation story from the Ojibwe. Everybody's welcome. Bring your own chair. Please refer to the website for any information on that. One of the Lions Clubs in Minot has given us some money. We're actually building a stage. Hopefully that'll be done by then, because the whole idea of this garden was based on, and I'm going to get the name wrong, I hope not, Buffalo Bird Woman, the book about the Hidatsa and the Mandan and the Crow. And in that book, she sang to the gardens. So we're going to have an opportunity for some garden, come weed the garden and listen to some music type of thing happening all summer long. But please refer to the website for that as well. Then finally, I am here also to invite you all to our 31st annual Spring Honor Dance and Powwow celebration being held April 30th and May 1st in the Minot State Dome. That will start off at 7 p.m. on the 30th, and then on May 1st, we have 1 and 7 p.m. again, grand entries. Let me just quick give you an update, or give you an idea of what a powwow is, because some of you might be going, what is that? So a powwow is called a wasipi in Dakota, or a nimiwin in Ojibwe. I probably am going to not say that correctly, and I hope my Ojibwe teacher's not listening. It is a meaning of celebration of life. And a powwow is a time when people of all ages gather. There's music and there's dance. And it's a time to come meet old and new friends. There's 2 forms of powwows, or 2 types of powwows. There's either a traditional powwow or a contest powwow, and Minot State's powwow is a contest powwow. And it's, people kind of equate it to like the powwow, or like to like a rodeo circuit, because our powwow was kind of the beginning of that rodeo, or the beginning of the powwow circuit in the state of North Dakota. There's powwows all over the state of North Dakota, all over the United States. We have 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. And there's 5 in North Dakota. So please come. If you have any questions, we can answer.
Thank you both for being here and for the invitation. Questions at this time?
Thank you. I appreciate you all so much.
Absolutely. Appreciate you being here. And again, the website is
Minot
State University, and there's a banner, correct? You
Right,
click
it's on there. And if there's also a Facebook page. And again, I apologize for not approaching you properly, Mayor and council members.
Not a problem whatsoever. We did get the email with the invitation on there, but again, for anybody, the website's easy to navigate. So thank you so much for being here.
Correct. And thank Visit Minot. They're part of one of our sponsors. Diversity Council at Minot State, the Mandan Hidatsa Rikwa Nation, and the Turtle Mountain Band of Ojibwe. Thank you.
Thank you. This is still under personal appearances. This is an opportunity for anybody to come forward and speak on any item that is or is not on our agenda. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to miscellaneous and discussion items. Are there any items that are needed to be discussed this evening? Alderman Patagula.
Just a personal comment. I wanted to thank a staff member for a very informative visit. That's our traffic engineer, Stefan Jers. I spent last Friday afternoon driving around, shadowing him, learning about intersections we have, the very good developments that are coming in terms of more advanced signal systems, things like that. I learned, I think, more in that afternoon about traffic engineering than I've learned in a long time. So I wanted to personally thank Stefan and the engineering department for being so hospitable. We will all be visiting the sign shop as part of our budget tour, and I'm looking forward to that. And he also wants to show me another intersection, and some of the other work he does. But it was a very, very fascinating, very informative afternoon I could spend with him. So I wanted to thank him very much for that.
Any other items under miscellaneous and discussion? If not, we'll move on to liaison reports. Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. I sit on the Renaissance Zone Committee, and our April meeting was canceled, so we have one in May. The other committee I sit on, organization I sit on, is the Visit Minot, and again, good things happening there. Obviously, the Women's National Tournament was held in Minot here this past weekend, and there is a lot of progress on attracting new events as well as growing events within the community at, again, with continued investment from the city and from citizens. A lot of fun and exciting things happening.
Alderman Pittner, did the girls play at 7 o'clock tonight for the championship? I can't remember. I think it was 7 o'clock tonight was the championship game that started at 7:35, and the MSU Lady Beavers were in the final game.
Yep. Well,
Alderman Ross, or am I a day off here?
I think you're a day off
day
because
off.
the women were beat last night,
They were, okay.
unfortunately. So the
In the
championship is
semifinals.
tonight.
Okay.
But the men are in the semifinals down in St. Louis.
Okay.
So
I've had a tough time
they're
following
playing
that
to get into
book.
the, yep, no problem.
Thank you, Alderman Ross, for that correction. I haven't been on Facebook hardly at all in a week. So, Alderman Ross.
The only update I have is from the Zoning Ordinance Steering Committee. We haven't had a meeting. We didn't meet this month. They've been busy getting the zoning map, land ordinance map up, and they'll be probably planning a meeting here in May or June to kick off the subdivision ordinance. And that's all I have to report.
Okay. MEDC, we did have our regular meeting and continue to work towards contractual obligations within that organization, as well as really how that evolution continues. I expect some more news out of MEDC, and I still say MEDC. It's Chamber EDC at this point. Apologize. Task Force 21, we do have, I would say, a very important DV visit coming up at Minot Air Force Base with a number of starred generals coming in for distinguished visitor guests. Inspections continue to go on. And we are meeting with a number of those generals and U.S. senators that are coming in this coming week, we hope, as they tour post-COVID, I guess, as those restrictions have been lightened up. Of course, Mark, being the chairman of Task Force, is leading that, but very much looking forward to what leadership from the Pentagon and different military installations around the country have to say. Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have already discussed the City Hall Building Committee that I am sitting on, and we have spent a number of hours already in discussion, and we have hours to days ahead of us, but it's an interesting committee to sit on, so I'm happy that I have a seat at that table. I have discussed CTE many times, and I am confident in saying that the details are basically worked out, and feel confident in saying that it should be on our May 3rd agenda to be able to discuss moving forward with the purchase of a building. So I'm excited at that process as well.
Sounds good. Thank you. Alderman Patagula.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 3 groups to report on. The first is the Ward County Planning Commission, in which Carrie and I both serve. Is Mark? No, I'll speak. Anyway, we conducted routine business on April 15th. We welcomed several new members to our group, including Professor Robert Kibler from the college, who actually was on the Burlington Planning Commission, so he brings a lot of expertise to that. We will be looking at another draft of the revised county zoning plan at our May meeting, the third Thursday of May at 6 o'clock. So it looks like we may be starting to get the maybe starting to make some progress on that plan. The second, and just routine business otherwise, the second group I'm on is the Minot Commission on Aging. We met on April 16th. Routine business, quote, we're in very good shape, close quote, financially. Congregate activities, speaking of COVID, will not be starting till around July 1st at the earliest, so they're being very, very careful, which I think is good, because almost by definition, the Commission on Aging services a very highly vulnerable population. Their big project will be paving the parking lot this summer, and they appreciated the guidance that the city engineer provided in terms of what a reasonable bid was. So they operate a little bit more informally, but they appreciated the information the city gave them. The third group I serve on is the Greenway Planning Environmental Restoration Group, which met on April 15th. And this, I think, will be this is a very big item. We met with representatives from the Audubon Society, and they are bringing in some very high-level planning and some significant financial investments in terms of helping restore the area that was flooded and is now being left by the city in terms of housing and things like that. Mr. Zakian will be presenting a formal report to the council probably at one of our next two meetings, outlining some potential options. But basically, we're looking at creating a multi-organizational working group with the Park Board, the city, and the Audubon Society, the people involved in the local rivers group, and I've spoken to reach out to them. And I also encourage the Audubon Society very strongly to try to find allies at the state and national level that are interested in other things besides other animals, besides birds and other causes. I know they do more than just birds. So we're looking at potentially developing 20 to 30 acres of land. It's a process that will take many years. They will be coming to the council with a proposal for a specific planning process to use up some of that NDR money that's still available and has to be used within a couple of years. One of the ideas I've had that has come from that meeting is perhaps an educational center of some sort, field station, if you will, that the schools could use, that Minot State Biology could use, and that the Children's Discovery Center perhaps could use as a place to get children used to studying the natural environment in terms of our river. The other important thing, besides being a lot of organizations coming together and having a long-range plan, is that this is something that will proceed in steps. And we're looking at a broad range of facilities, maybe from traditional fields for sporting activities to places to walk and exercise, a soccer field, trying to use lots of native grasses to minimize mowing expenses, and then also leaving some areas very much as they were before we moved in and disrupted the environment. This has the potential for being an emerald necklace for the community, something that will really change the face of our community for the next 50 or 100 years. So we're moving quickly to start the planning process. The planning process will take a while. We want to have some concrete deliverables, if you will, fairly soon. But again, an ongoing, I don't want to say never ending, but a very ongoing, very long-term process of revitalizing the valley. Probably in the long run, one of the most important things we can do. So I'm very excited about that. And we're seeing lots of cooperation, lots of teamwork, and trying to get more of that too. So that's what I have to report.
Thank you, Alderman Patagula. Alderman Janser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the comments. The liaison committee has not met. And I would remind people on behalf of the Broadway Corridor Study Committee that we are looking for public input. So if you would go to the website and add your comments relative to the some of the preliminary design information, we would be most grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And appreciate you joining us via Teams this evening, even though that you're off visiting family. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, sir.
With that, we are Set to number 11, adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Pittner, second by Alderman Ross. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.